In this episode called The Attention Gap Through the Eyes of a U.S. Fighter Pilot, we'll discuss things like Wesley's riveting experience of flying a Top Gun-esque military operation, the attention age, the attention gap, and why attention is the most valuable thing today, and of course, leading in the attention age. Now, here are some things to ponder. Where do you need to spend your attention today to make progress on your goals both at work and at home? What are the things that are hijacking your attention? Is it Netflix? Is it focusing on how just to get through the day when you could also be soaking up and getting from the day? When you consider what makes you feel most alive, beneficial, and productive, what will you now choose to engage with? Will it be a new book, a new podcast, a new conversation with a friend? And why is it essential that you implement the things that you learn? What's the upside, the specific upside to giving your undivided attention to what you absorb in the new activity? In which specific area of your life will you be most impacted if you laser down now? Welcome to Weekly Wins and Losses. My name is James Hepner, former real estate entrepreneur turned self-development hacker, coach, and fulfillment strategist. Each week, we bring you a thought to wrestle with that'll help you live fully alive and gain more life. Real life is made up of both wins and losses. Both were designed for your good. That's basic reality. Without facing and learning how to embrace your losses for greater gain, you miss out. You leave 50% of your life experience on the table. So with that, let's begin the show. Friends, today is a special day for me. All the podcasts are. But this gentleman, I don't know if you individuals knew this about me, but I've always wanted to fly in a fighter plane. And today I have Wesley Woodhouse on the show. Wes is that fighter plane pilot. So I get to fly with Wes today. Welcome to the show, Wes.
Thank you very much for having me, James. Glad to
Not a
be here.
problem. Not a problem. Wes is I'll do a short little introduction here before we get right into the wings of this little talk. But Wes is a husband, a father, marathon runner, a fighter pilot, and his mission is to build up the next generation of leaders, armed to take on the dynamic challenges of the attention age. In 2020, he founded Vector Altas. It's a leadership development and attention cultivation agency. So his day job, of course, friends, is he flies for the U.S. Air Force, and he flies an operational test squadron where he tests the latest hardware. So he's right up into, which is right in my wheelhouse. You're right with the current tech, and you're like sampling and hacking and biohacking and personal development hacking, whatever you're doing, and you're learning to develop those tactics to employ them, of course, when most needed. So Wes, I got a lot of bent up positive energy for this one.
That's great. That's
for,
awesome. Bring it.
for many a reason. But hey, yeah, why don't you just share with the audience, if you don't mind, you know how it typically is, like us on the outside of these forces, like U.S. forces, Canadian forces. I'm not sure what kind of weaponry they have or what kind of fighter pilots they have, or not pilots. When it comes to hardware, we don't have some of the tech that you guys have in the States typically. But here's to the play. If I ever pick up a book on personal development or people taking themselves to the edge, like I was telling you just prior to us engaging on this record, I said, oh my goodness, I'm always fascinated about people who take themselves further faster, but finding a way not to hurt themselves. And years ago, I did further faster, but I hurt myself. And so my work over the last decade, I help men do further faster without help, without hurting themselves. And that's who you are. And typically us people on the outside of those forces, like what you're involved in, when we pick up a book, I hate to say it, but we want to hear war stories or war. We want to hear these, wow, this happened and then this happened. It doesn't need to be where you say, and I killed that person, but it's like, we want to hear these stories. And so maybe if you don't mind, if you could, and if you don't mind, enlighten the audience and just provide one story that's going to be a bit of a thrill ride for a moment, if you could. And I hate to put you on the spot like this, but my audience, they just need to get it out of their system. You know what I mean? So that they can hear all the rest of the good stuff we're going to talk about.
So there's one situation that comes to mind. I was deployed back in 2019 and 2020 in the fight against ISIS. ISIS at this point had been mostly defeated, but there were still small cells operating here and there, and we were mostly there just to make sure nothing sort of kicked off and to kind of just clean up the messes and button everything up. So
Mm.
I got assigned a mission. I was the mission commander for our goal was to destroy a couple caves that ISIS had been storing equipment in and using as kind of like a communications node, hiding all their stuff. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't honestly know. So this is partially speculation, but just gathering up
Mm-hmm.
supplies and whatnot to then deploy. So we were just the goal was to just close up the cave entrances and not even, I mean, probably wouldn't destroy the material and whatnot, but at least it'd restrict access to it. And so we had a couple different formations. I was the flight lead of a two ship of F-15E Strike Eagles, and there was, I think, another two ship of fighters out there that we were fighting with. And the goal was, I think there were, I don't know, 5 or 6 caves that we were trying to close up. And so the idea was that we'd have both formations attack from opposite directions because the caves opened up into a very narrow ravine. So it's like you had this kind of almost like a canyon that was twisting and turning, and the cave entrances were in the sides of it. So it's very difficult to get weapons in. So there were very specific run-in headings for the bomb to come in and fall and actually hit the top of the cave and kind of destroy the rock over top of it and crumble it in and close up the cave entrance. And when we got out there, we had a couple of issues with because there's a lot of permissions that you have to get in order to do a strike like this. We were waiting on permissions, and the time was getting later and later. While at the same time we were trying to get a good look at the target area and make sure that it looked like we thought it was going to look in our mission planning and everything. And then verify that the run-in headings were good to go, but we also didn't want to overfly the target to potentially alert anybody on the ground that we were in the vicinity. So I was trying to manage all this, get permissions, verify our run-in headings, try all this stuff out, communicate with the other flight to make sure that we had a good plan for our simultaneous attack. And the point was not so much to drop the weapons at the same time. We wanted the weapons to impact at the same time. So it's slightly more complicated, I guess. Something that we practiced to, but not a whole lot.
Top Gun 2.0.
What's that?
Top Gun.
That's right. Yes,
right?
exactly.
Top Gun. So the movie, it's like that kind of mission, but like I love it. Beautiful. Yeah.
It is.
And so,
actually, now that I think about it, it's kind of similar.
So were you in the air at the time, right? You were in the air as you were navigating all of this.
Right. So we got this mission, and we only had, I think, 24 hours of notice. So there was minimal mission planning that we put into it. Usually for something like this, we would spend a lot more time and really analyze the terrain, since that was a huge factor, and then run a couple of simulations, maybe even jump into a simulator and actually try it out and see how it would work and to get the timing down. But this one, we didn't have a whole lot of time. So it was mostly just like over the phone cord with the other flight lead of, hey, here's generally my plan for how we're going to do this. And then all of a sudden we were airborne. It was in the middle of the night, and we had all this stuff going on, trying to get permissions. We did get permission eventually. And we ended up executing the attack. I think we only had probably 10 minutes left within our window of time to accomplish this thing. So the actual impact time didn't matter so much, as long as it was within, I think it was like an hour and a half window or something like that we had before it was like, okay, after that point, then the mission is off and you'll go to an alternate mission or just go home. But so we dropped, we coordinated it. We got permissions. We set the impact time that we would all run our formation and bombing run on. And so then it's like, all right, I set the time, and then it's just like, okay, now we got to make this thing happen. So we flew, made sure that at this point I was really just in charge of my own formation. That formation had to figure out their own tactics, because we were going kind of opposite direction. We were obviously deconflicted by altitude, and then we would turn the opposite direction after we released. But so we run in, and it was, I mean, you can look at night watching the bombs go off is pretty awesome, because you can visually see it a lot better than you can during the day, because it's like that's the only bright light out there.
Incredible.
We also have our kind of our targeting pods, which are like the TV, or in this case it would have been infrared. That's like a soda straw. You can see very zoomed in on the target area. But out of I think it was, I want to say it was like 9 or 10 bombs that we dropped total between the two formations. They all impacted within, I think it was within about 3 or 4 seconds, which was eye-watering to watch. It was just like, it happened and you're like holding your breath, waiting for this to, waiting to see is one of them going to hit too early and then the others are going to hit, 20 seconds later, or what's this going to look like? And it was like boom, 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 boom. It was very cool to watch. And it was very satisfying that, we put in all this training, and the reason that mission was successful is not because of anything that happened in the 24. There was skill required in the 24 hours, and there's a little bit of mission planning that happened in the 24 hours, but 80% of that mission was successful because of all of the training that we had done well prior to the time where we got the mission, where the mission was assigned to us. And that was the same for me personally, the same for everybody flying in my formation, and the same for everybody flying in the other formation. We were all, because it was such a short task and it was such a complicated mission, and that we didn't have time to exhaustively plan and go through all of the different contingencies, which is a big part of mission planning, and figure out, all right, where can this mission fail? And then let's figure out how we're going to mitigate that or make it so that it's so that we're going to ensure success. But 80% of the success of that night was due to all of the training and the mindset and everything, all of that came prior to the 24 hours before the impact, which I think is probably the biggest lesson learned that I had from that mission. So that was pretty cool. I mean, like I said, just like setting the time on target and then watching all of the weapons impact exactly how you wanted it to, it was very satisfying and very cool.
Gosh, Wes, that's an incredible story. And so, the way I entered the podcast, of course, saying that I would love to fly in a plane. I know that I probably never, I'll never get the green light to be in a flight like that, because that's like, top security stuff, and it's, of course, it's military. But thanks for like showing us a little bit of a picture, and that's like really adrenalizing. Like you and I, we talked about how when Top Gun came out, and I said, "Hey, did you go see it?"
Right.
And what was your response? It helped the listeners. What was your response? Do you remember?
I think I said that my squadron, a pretty big squadron, there's about 65 pilots in the squadron. We rented out 3 different movie theaters so that we could all just go watch it on the big screen at the same time. Poke fun at the portions that were poke funnable. Overall, I thought it was a great movie. It exceeded my expectations. So
Super fun, super fun. So here's the thing: when I hear and when we lean in and we listen to what you were saying about, so there you are, you create this, you create this opportunity, and it's short, it's complex, it commands and demands all of your attention, and you're the attention guy. We're going to talk a lot about attention today. You're all about this. And what's interesting is it was quite the show. Like, we can see your eyes. Like, those that are just listening to this podcast, you might want to tap in and go to YouTube and just watch him, because you can see there's a certain stage of this talk where all of a sudden he's like in mode, and you're going to see it. His eyes do something, and it's like, whoa, there he goes. He's in. And it's that moment of when it all just happened and it worked out within 3 to 4 seconds. Like, that's precision work. And of course, it was a short mission, very complex. Like, basically execute, go, and you got it. You nailed it within 3-4 seconds. Like, you're flying way in the air, and the bombs coming down, and they're impacting and exploding at that virtually exact time. Like you say, it was quite the, I'm just feeling with you. It's dark out, you're in the plane, you've done all this hard work training, sometimes in the studio probably, and it's like mindset. Do we have to do, yeah, let's go further, let's go faster, let's not hurt anyone, let's go right to the edge. And you're like stress testing and doing all that work before the mission, never knowing that all of that work, I mean, yes, we anticipate that this might be worth something, because that's why we do it. But all of a sudden, when you're there, it's like, whoa, this is what it gave me. This experience, this precision. I want to tap into that attention focus. When you think about preparation, like, what did you learn in that moment? If you could put it in your own words, what did you learn about the attention and the focus that you needed to have within, like you say, 80% of the success came in that training and preparation time? What did you learn about attention and focus because of that story? And how did it deepen? Because you're all about this now. To some degree, you're saying that attention and focus is hard baked into every aspect. In this story, it just so happens that that attention and focus needed to for surely be in the preparation and training, because if not, you wouldn't have executed. There's no way.
Well, a couple things I would say on that. First off, the nice thing about flying jets is that when you get in the cockpit, many of the normal distractions that we face on a day-to-day basis just go away just by the very nature of you're in a cockpit and you're complete. Like, it's not like somebody can walk by your office and be like, oh, hey, I had a question for you, or the phone's not going to ring, or you're not checking email in the cockpit. Your cell phone is not in the cockpit, so I'm not hearing the dings and the buzzes and all the barrage of notifications and just inputs that we have on a day-to-day basis. So the nice thing about the cockpit of a fighter, and there are probably many other applications of this, throughout different jobs that we have. I mean, not flying airplanes, but it takes away a lot of the distractions, a large percentage of the distractions that we face. You're obviously not getting out of your own mind. You still have, like if I've got, something big coming up tonight with the family, or, I'm thinking about, hey, I've got a vacation coming up, or I've got a big decision point about, something financial or something like that. That's always in the back of your mind. And that can always come up regardless of where you are. Right. The other thing too is, I mean, the easiest kind of parallel is sports. A lot of times when we are playing sports, and I actually just learned this the other week, that flying objects, which most sports involve flying objects, like baseball, basketball, football, soccer, all of them involve objects that are free flying. And so you're tracking them and you're deciding where to move in relation to where the other movement of the players, as well as the ball or whatever it is in whatever sport it is. That type of thing puts you into the flow state more than other types of activities. And so similarly with flying, there's obviously a lot of flying objects around when you're flying. But that type of environment just kind of helps get you into flow better, more often, more consistently. And then you add on the added adrenaline and stress and gravity of, oh, we're flying around in combat with actual live weapons that we're intending on employing on a specific target. There's a lot of implications with that. I mean, if we accidentally drop that bomb on the wrong target and, kill somebody who an innocent bystander in the area, that has serious legal implications that potentially could seriously affect my career. And whether or not, depending on the finding, I may never fly again, type of thing. So there's a lot of gravity that goes into situations like that. All of those factors focus attention and put you into that flow state and hyper sensitize your senses, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, all of that type of stuff. But to get to the root of your question, I think for me, what that situation, and that's not the only one when I was deployed, and that's definitely not the only one throughout my entire career that has kind of exemplified this, but with relation to attention and focus, and specifically the preparation side of it, is, there's a quote, and I'm not going to get the phrasing right, and I can't even remember off the top of my head who said this, and I think there's a couple that are similar, but we are the sum total of all of the thoughts that we've ever thought, or the sum total of all the attention that we've ever paid throughout our lives, right? James, you are where you are because of the experiences. One of them that you kind of mentioned at the beginning, where you went too far and then had to come back and kind of figure out the balance. I'm the sum total of, everything from my schooling early on, the path towards becoming a fighter pilot, all of my training, all of the, my family life, how supportive or unsupportive my spouse is. She is awesome, by the way, as far as the support. But, the situation that you have with your kids, there's more stressors or less stressors, all that type of stuff. And that's all of that sum total goes into who you are and the amount of attention and skill that you can bring in any single point. So that is where the importance of, when you're going through training, whether it is your high school courses, your college courses, the on-the-job training, just self training. James, you talked about reading books. Hopefully a lot of the listeners here are well into personal development, reading books, taking courses, bettering themselves, personal development. As you're doing that, it kind of gives a little bit more of an importance to that, because at any given point, and I'm pointing to my book, the current book that I'm reading, I don't know what in this book will manifest itself and will be the answer or an answer to a problem that I'm going to face in the future. But at some point, I can guarantee you that something in this book, even if it's as simple as just making a connection with another concept that I've learned previously, and now that connection is the key to my making sense of whatever it is that I'm facing, that all matters so much. And it seems trivial at the time. You're doing training, you're like, why am I doing this training? And honestly, a lot of times there are some trainings. I mean, I'm talking from the Air Force point of view. There's a lot that seems like, why am I having to spend time on this? I could be spending I could be spending this time on something a lot more useful. But the bottom line is, we just don't know what exactly will need to happen, what that learning, that attention that we spent now, how that's going to affect our decision making and our skill and our knowledge and wisdom, and that all of that type of stuff at any single point where everything matters so much more than normally. Like for example, in the middle of the night, making a mission happen.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for unpacking it for us. It really helps. The one thing that I'm picking up that you talk about, and it's kind of bringing up in me perhaps why I'm so fascinated. Like, I love going to air shows, and I love seeing these planes, right? And just coming in, and then the throttle control and slowing it down and then just gunning it. Like this in life, we want to feel. Some people say we don't want to feel too much. The only thing is, if you're not feeling, you're dead. So you want to feel, at least to a certain degree, you want to feel something, right? Yes. So when you go from a maneuver from one position, just going fast is like, well, just about feeling like not moving. But slow down, speed up. It's like, oh, there's a bit of a feel, up, down, right? And so to adjust throttle, I often talk with my people will know this, we talk about throttle control. And that's really, if we own our life, if we strategically focus on the things that we choose, not through the lens of is it good or bad, but how about we just pick up the book and we see what's there, like you say, or we're in this environment and there's a bunch of flying objects and I am here, and how I'm here and me observing these other moving things, how is this non-threatening? In essence, how is it actually bringing me more life? Some people are like, well, let's not do too much movement. It's like, well, not too much movement looks like death to me. The more movement you have, the more life there is. And when you're threatened by a lot of movement, to me, what it brings up is this. When you're threatened by a lot of movement, that just, what I think comes alive for people is this uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen. Listen, if you just stop, if things would just stop, then I can finally see what's there. The only thing is, what's stopped, there isn't a lot of vibration there. There isn't a lot of newness going on. You get to close around it. And it's interesting because we get to form subtle judgments on it. And judgments aren't good or bad per se in this way. Like, do I take action or not take action? The only thing is, there seems to be something about the human being that likes to be off balance. Not knowing, focusing on the unknown, meaning playing in uncertain space, seems to actually bring to us, at least tell me what you think. It seems, for me anyway, it brings us to this place of being, what's in here? How will I respond? Even though I've trained like crazy, how will I respond when something happens that I have no reference for? Who am I then? Who am I then? Because what I'm hearing you say, and kind of subtly, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong on this, but what I hear you talking about is, I take action and I get through things, and I don't say in spite of, but it seems to me like you have this subtle, and whether you're aware of how you're languaging, but what I'm gleaning from you, it's like, no, I gain my ability to perform and execute strategically well because of, not in spite of, but because of. So all of these moving pieces, all of the things that I was aware of in training, but that I wasn't of, but then there's certain things that if you're not present, meaning in training, if you're not present on focusing, what ends up happening when you're not present, when the moment comes when you have no reference for it, you're like, fuck, what do I do now? Pardon the language, but fuck. I got a few non-friendlies around me happening quick. What do I do? We haven't trained for this. You all of a sudden discover who you are when you're on ground that is so uncertain, but because you've trained for not trying to defend against and feel threatened about moving things are kind of like friendly, curious things to you. You're like, and how do I, like you say to sports, how do I respond to this? Do I initiate? Do I not do anything? What do I do? And then you discover something that comes out of you, and it's an action. It's the thing before the thing kind of thing. Like, often we say, we have a response, and we're like, wait a minute, I responded before I even thought. Why did I do that? It's the thing before we act that actually controls our life. Right. So what is this resonating in you? Because I'm hearing a lot of this because of, not in spite of. I'm hearing uncertainty is like you play with it. And it's like, that's the edge we want to Tony Robbins says, to the exact degree that you can handle uncertainty comfortably is to the degree that you're going to enjoy life. And so I'm hearing you really show up on a place going, okay, I haven't cheated death. I've strategically found a way to play with the life-death concept. I'm not so afraid of death. But I have found something, and I wonder if that's not attention and focus, something that has given me, quote unquote, an advantage. I don't know what's coming alive for you, through all of this, because you're making my brain spin, and I love it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that too. You're doing the same thing to me. So, a couple things I jotted down as I was listening to you. The like point of uncertainty, when you get past that, that's usually we call that the comfort zone. I would say, and when you get past that, that's where you get into the realm of you're going to start learning a lot, because it's the like point of uncertainty, when you get past that, that's usually we call that the comfort zone. I would say, and when you get past that, that's where you get into the realm of you're going to start learning a lot, because there's a quote, life begins at the edge of the comfort zone. A lot of people talk about learning when you're getting yourself into situations that are outside of your comfort zone, because you're going to be a lot more aware. Your awareness, attention, to your point, when you're somewhere uncomfortable, you're taking in more. Your brain is automatically taking in more information. For example, we got back from vacation just a couple days ago, and when
I'm so sorry. Can I just pause you for a second?
yeah,
I'm so sorry. I updated my computer and for some reason I cannot turn the do not disturb. So we're just going to keep going. So people are going to hear dings. It sounds like strategically I'm saying he's saying something important that therefore it's dinging, but that's not why. I'm so
maybe it
sorry.
is.
And that could be it too. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm
Sorry.
sending you a message every single time I'm saying something really important. I'm just kidding. But so for all right, so driving home from vacation, right? It was very interesting, and I haven't really thought about this until just now when you were saying this, and getting me thinking. But when I'm driving around in an area that I've even never been in or have only driven in a few times, I'm a lot more aware. I don't know what the road ahead looks like. So when I'm trying to pass somebody, maybe I don't know if it's a straight stretch or, if there's a hill or a hidden blind spot or something like that. But the closer I got to home, and once I got to roads that I have traveled many, many times before, the driving became completely different. I didn't need to put nearly as much thought and attention into my driving because I knew what the road was like. I knew what the drivers are like in the area. I know exactly what exit I'm supposed to take. I know the straight spots. I know where the turns are. I know when I need to slow down or speed up, all those things. So all of a sudden, I need to pay less attention to driving because I already know what to expect and I know where to turn. And I can pay more attention to thinking or talking with my wife or, whatever else it is. And that's it was actually, as I think about it, it's a very stark transition between that. And I've never really thought about that before, but I think that's kind of exactly what you were just talking about, because when I'm putting myself in a place where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of potential threats that I don't know. And so I have to identify and make those little judgments of, hey, specifically back to the driving example, is this stretch of road more dangerous? There was a sign that said there might be cattle on the road. Is that like half the time, or is it all the time, or is it almost none of the time? I just don't know. So I have to put my awareness into looking for cattle in a way that if that's a road that I drive every single day and I know the cattle patterns, I know that some months out of the year there's lots of cattle, but then most of the others there's none, then I don't have to worry about it. And it's from a place of knowledge. And again, back to my prior point, I think of where the aggregation of the attention that we've paid. If I drove that road 50 times, but never paid attention to the patterns of when there were threats and when there weren't threats, then in that next instance, I would still be in the same place that I was before. And humans naturally do this. Our mind naturally does this. We are always looking for patterns. We're always, whenever we're in that uncertain area, uncertain place, we're paying attention. We're looking for patterns. Then that 51st time I'm driving that road, I'm a lot more confident. And the attention that I can pay in that moment is on more detailed things or whatever I need to be paying, something completely different, because I've built up that knowledge and that awareness of that specific area. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about. It goes along. I wrote down, what you put in is what you get out. There's a lot of that. In college, for example, there was a friend of mine just a couple doors down, and he ended up dropping out of school mostly, and I would attribute the reason mostly to video games. He was not spending the right amount.
I'll tell my kids.
Yeah, he was not spending the right amount of time, which generally translates to attention, on studying, and he was spending too much time / attention on gaming. And because of that, he was asked not to come back the next semester because his grades were in the dirt. He got out of it what he put into it. He didn't put anything in it, so he got nothing out of it. Whereas, I had plenty of other friends who knew exactly that they wanted to get this degree and they wanted to do this well so that they could get this job afterwards. And most all of them got out of it what they put into it. They all now have great jobs in the area that in exactly the area, or
Mm.
sometimes even the exact company that they wanted. I think we talked about sports a little bit. For my profession, fighter pilots, a lot of type A personalities. There's
Mhm.
always competition.
Mhm.
Competition helps put us into that state that you were talking about, which is flow state, and that's just a heightened state of attention, and using more of your subconscious, and you're relying on your skills and your intuition a lot more than your conscious thought. uh, Competition drives you into that flow state
Mhm.
consistently
Mm.
and quickly, because I want to be better than this other guy. I want to be we give out all sorts of awards like best air to air Top Gun, or air to
Mm.
ground Top Gun, and we'll have different competitions every once in a while. But the point of that is because everybody gets better when we're all trying to be the best that we possibly can, because we're learning, and we're learning from each other's mistakes. The in the fighter community, we do a really good job of completing the feedback loop between planning, execution, debrief, which is where we dig into
Mm.
what went well
Mm.
with the planning and the execution, what went poorly with the planning and execution, and what can we learn from it. And then going one step farther, spreading our lessons learned around the entire squadron, instead of just taking that in personally or in our flight, and then learning. We'll all take those lessons learned to move forward, so that we
Mm.
can all be better and not make
Mm.
the same mistakes, and have the same forethought. And you know what, we've been in this situation before. And then the fourth and last thing, to answer your question, and again, I think the military does this very well. There's
Dang, you
plenty of
got
other.
attention. Holy smokes. You listen
Yeah.
to all the things and you go one, two, three, four. I'm like, holy smokes, we got
Well, I
something to
did
learn
write them
here.
down,
I
so
love it.
I'm
Thank
just
you.
going
That's
down
good.
my
Yeah.
list. But
Yeah. Mhm.
most militaries have phenomenal survival training
Mhm.
programs.
Mhm.
I've only been through the Air Force one, but
Mhm.
the reason that it is so good is because they put you in the environment that they are training you to be able to affect. So the goal of survival training, obviously, is if I find myself
Mhm.
somewhere in the middle of nowhere, could be in the middle of a desert, could be in the middle of mountainous tundra with snow and ice and not very much food. They they train you academically, and then they actually threw us out into the field for about a week, and we're like, hey, survive, evade, and survive. I mean, there were the instructors that were everywhere, that they were keeping an eye on everybody.
Mhm.
Nobody was gonna die,
Mhm.
hopefully.
Mhm. Mhm.
But by putting us in that environment and getting that training, and we were
Mhm.
doing the things that we had learned in that actual environment that we could potentially find ourselves in the future, we were learning in a way that is far better than just sitting down and reading or taking a course, um, because we're actually applying it. And then the next time I all of a sudden look up and I'm by myself in the middle of nowhere, and I have no idea when rescue is going to
Mhm.
come, I'm going to immediately fall back onto those skills, even if I haven't practiced them for years. Which for me, survival training was, I think, 6 years ago, and some of it is probably, some of those penguins have probably fallen off, but I think
Mhm.
many of them would come right back the second I look up and I find myself in the situation. I'm like, what do I do now? Oh yeah, I'm just going to start doing this, because this is the training. We do that in the flying community for, hey, this is a potential threat, this is a potential area that we're going to find ourselves in, so let's specifically train to what types of missions we might be flying at that point, so that boom, we get the call tomorrow, we have to go out and fly those types of missions. It won't be identical, but it will probably be very, very close. It'll be the same
Mhm.
threats, so you've already got those numbers memorized, and all that stuff. And that is, for leadership, for attention, putting yourself in the environment that you're training for. It's kind of like dressing up, like dressing for the
Mhm.
job that you want, not necessarily the job that you have. When you're coming to whatever training it is, or whatever job it is, and you're putting yourself in the place that you want to be, then when you actually get there,
Mhm.
it'll be a lot less uncomfortable. And then you can pay more attention to the finer details and grabbing more out of the situation than you would have if it was the 50th time on that
Mhm.
on that road, but you hadn't paid attention at
Mhm.
all to any of the patterns.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, attention
Gosh,
and
there's
focus,
yeah.
in my mind, and that's why I'm passionate about it. It's all throughout. It doesn't matter any of the four different points I made. Attention is what attention you put in is integral into what you're going to get out
Mm.
of it.
Okay, so what I like to do, and by the way, there's so much stuff spinning in my heart, in my head right now. I want to ask you so many things. You stirred up a whole bunch, and I'm thinking we might not have time to do all of it today. So at some point in time, maybe we'll do a part two because, and what I
Yeah.
like to do, the reason for part two, if you're okay with it, if you and I can both agree to it, is I don't want to confuse the listeners because I can sometimes ask questions and they're so layered, and it's like, okay, people have a hard time tracking. And even if I listen to it, I'm like, hey, what was I asking there? You know what I mean? So I'm going to for myself, I'm going to slow it down a little bit because sometimes I need to slow it down a little bit just to go, okay, we're just going to chew off. We don't need to hit some finish line. We're just on a journey. We're just
Yeah.
experiencing. So by the way, you're doing a great job, by the way. And I just, because there's so much going on, I need to slow it down for me, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
So here's to the play. And I guess the reason I need to slow it down, it's like you say in the cockpit, it's like being in a state of flow. We all know, each of us, every listener here, you know what will take you into flow state.
Hmm.
And for me, I am quite demanding and commanding of myself. And so I'm always like, reach higher, reach higher. Like, for example, my son, Harrison, I got two of them, 17 and 15. Rowan is 17, Harrison's 15. And Harrison has high functioning autism. And he went to a Tony Robbins Global Youth Leadership Summit. And this is his second year. And Rowan was a leader this year. And all of a sudden, after day three, he comes out of his bedroom and he'd been going for about 14 hours. It's a pretty intense day, right? It's immersion learning. And I think, to your point, I think a lot of a lot of that can be entrained by holding someone's attention and expanding it, right? Anyway, so he coming out of his room and he's got his tear. He's got some tears coming. I'm like, hey, what's going on, buddy? And he says, you know what, mom and dad, I love the event. My second year at it, great people, high energy. But he goes, something about the event doesn't seem like it's for me. And in the past, if he'd ever feel like he didn't know how he fit in, he would get angry at himself, angry at people, and just angry at situation. But he comes out and they say that first there's anger, which can be helpful, but next to anger is actually you're feeling sad, and besides sadness is love. And love, if you're in that, that's when you're in the in the flow state. And so he comes out, and for the first time ever, we were so aware. And to your point on awareness, we're so incredibly proud of him, my friend, because instead of us having to frame where he could be aware, he was aware. He said, you know what? They're asking me to jump higher, clap louder, do all this stuff. And he goes, you know what? I'm already going as high and as far as I can, because he, like me, pushes himself so far immediately. Don't get me wrong. There's always a little bit extra, 10% in the tank, but we don't have to be nudged to go from 10% giving to like 80%. We're already giving 80. So if you nudge me once, twice, I'm giving 100. So you ask me to do it again. I can do more. And I'll never forget when I went to years ago, I went to a Date with Destiny, and I had a gentleman. So that's a Tony Robbins event. A gentleman, he comes around, and we were all supposed to like shout out our values and our new life and our new story. And people are like just getting out there and getting loud. And for me, it just, I was beginning to lose myself, and I was trying to shout. And this gentleman comes around and he taps me on the shoulder. It was a facilitator for Tony's event. He was a speaker at the event as well. And he looks at me, he takes me aside, and he goes, hey, how are you feeling? And I said, oh, I feel like I'm not doing it. Like, people are getting better and better at presenting, because we're like, no, that's not good enough. Do it again, do it again, do it again. And I said, I'm not getting better. And he goes, that's because you need to like do the opposite of getting louder. You need to get quieter from within and feel deeper from within. That's your place. You already have such high expectations of yourself. You need to appreciate that something is wanting to enter and you can do it. And so Harrison said this. He goes, Dad, Mom, I become aware. And again, so proud of him. The first moment ever. He's 15 years old, my friend. So on awareness, my friend, if I die tomorrow, I know that kid will be okay. And he's always would have been okay. But he was aware, not because somebody else told him that he needed to adjust, but he was aware in motion. It's like the cockpit in the plane, what's going down, bombs everywhere, things going on. And you're like, yeah, but what's best here in my space? Because you need to show up as a strong leader. You need to show up and execute the right precision thing. And he did it for himself in the moment. He wasn't angry at other people. He didn't deflect, but he used that awareness to drive him closer to the magic of the moving pieces. And so, you know what? He basically had this formula. He said, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to talk to the leaders saying, I love the event, but you're going to notice this about me, and I have high functioning autism, and I need to do this. And the leader's like, that's amazing, Harrison. So then they made him a little card. They sent it to him via electronic, and they said, print this up, put it on your computer. And we want you to know, we're here with your awareness. We celebrate that in you. And I love that space. And so here's the reason I love it. And the reason I went on that little tangent is it's all about awareness. And I got a few questions. One of them being, and actually, before I prime you with this question, We, the listeners, are picking up that you're a human being. You're not a robot that's been programmed. You're not God. You're a human being. You have some total thoughts like we do.
Mm-hmm.
You have had all kinds of crazy thoughts like we all do. So what's interesting, to your point on, we are the sum total of focus that we are becomes who we are in life. What comes to the surface for me is what we must do about life is not say I had a really horrible thought and let that build into some weird identity, or I had a really good thought, I'm bigger than I am. There needs to be humility, hard baked. Speaking of type A personalities, having so much of it. If you don't have humility and have a system that fosters that, I think what ends up happening, and I'd like to hear your point on this, we tend to judge good or bad. And if you judge good or bad, that's what activates threat response in an unhelpful way when you're in a place of uncertainty. When you're a place of, even though you know through survival training what to do, what not to do to some degree, but things are never exactly the way you train. They're always there's some extra dimensions and there's a little extra flow going on. I think when we go, oh shoot, is my worth going to be valued or less valued based on my action? And we're thinking too much about that, and we're getting caught up in status hierarchy and where we're going to fall on self-preservation. What ends up happening, I think what ends up happening is we end up making some really silly decisions. It's a little like a dog. A dog can focus only on danger and safety. That's what a dog does all the time. The human being's been given an extra dimension. A human being can go beyond thinking, is it good or is it bad? You and I can stare at each other or out the window and not be looking at anything other than just contemplating nothing. So there's an extra dimension that goes beyond self-preservation. And so here's my question. When you think about awareness, a few questions about awareness. Number one, how can we have awareness without having exhaustion? Because when I listen to your story, beautiful story, driving a car, cattle down the road, you're saying, hey, listen, I need to be a lot more aware when I drive down a road when I don't know what the patterns are of the livestock crossings, whatever. How can we have awareness without creating exhaustion? And one of the things that comes to heart for me is this without feeling good or bad about something? We're just impartial. We're like, well, let's see. And is that the surrender that you give when you are in the military? You surrender to something bigger than you. You're always surrendering, and you're never saying, I am God, or I know the answer, do what I say. It's like, actually, I need to be at peace here, and I need to ground into and drop into who I am and be in a state flow 360. Dude, there's a whole bunch of stuff I asked you there, and I asked a few questions within one. So sorry, but there's just so much, and I'm already trying to slow it down. So there you go.
So what's the thing I would say for that awareness without exhaustion? There's a couple things. We, like you said, we're human beings, and what do we spend the most of our time doing is sleeping, right? 6 hours a day is sleeping. There's at least 6 to 8, really. There's nothing else that we do for 6 to 8 hours every single day. So sleeping is the thing that we do the most. And that is the thing. I heard a stat the other day that the number one thing that you can do for peak human performance is to get good sleep, because having bad sleep regularly will reduce your performance, and that's mental and physical, by up to and probably exceeding 50%. So the single one thing that you can do to make sure that you're always operating at your peak performance, and that's peak attentional performance, the attention that you're paying, pattern building, your relationship performance, your physical performance, your performance at work, all of those things. The number one thing is getting adequate sleep, and it's something that I probably don't do quite as well as I should. So what that kind of leads into is I flipped over into my notebook here from a couple weeks back. I was in a training on flow cycle, and there is a specific cycle that has been identified of flow, and if you're completing this cycle, then you're creating the conditions for getting into that flow state or that high end attentional state more often. And it starts with recovery. There's 4 steps: recovery, friction, release, and then flow. But recovery, if you're not getting that recovery, because you go from flow back into recovery, it's a cycle like that. If you're not getting enough recovery, then you're probably rarely, if ever, going to actually make it through the rest of the cycle into that flow state, that the heightened state of awareness and attentional performance and human performance, really. So the rest and the recovery aspect, which includes sleep, and sleep is just one of them, is probably the most, I was in college. I can think back, I think I only did 2 or 3 all-nighters during college, and only one of them was an academic all-nighter for studying for a test or something like that. And thinking back, I probably didn't do that because there was something in me that was telling me that that's probably not beneficial, staying up all night prior to taking an exam. Yeah, I'm cramming myself with information, but then I'm going to be so mentally and physically taxed by the time that actual exam comes around that I'm probably not going to perform what I would if I put in some good hours of studying and then got some good hours of sleep, and then maybe woke up a little bit early and did a little bit more studying or something like that. I can't, the one all-nighter I did, I can't remember how well I did or how bad I did, but that doesn't really matter anymore. But that's what I would say. I often, the kind of examples that I give is, especially in the military, but this counts for everybody. There's times in life where you're going to be required to swing. The work-life balance is kind of a false goal to strive for, I guess. But in a way, I think of it as a pendulum. At times, I have to swing the pendulum into the work side. Like, for example, deployment. I was gone for 7 or 8 months, and so I was physically at a work location 100% of the time, and so everything else, like in my mind, emotions, everything was focused on work. The pendulum swung all the way to the work side. But then when I got back, we were encouraged and pretty much almost forced to take a solid chunk of leave from work and to spend that time with family. So the pendulum swung to the other direction. And then for the next few months, even, the workload was purposefully less so that you could be with the family more and take care of your family and spend time with them. And the pendulum swung to that side. So I think of, and there's the macro pendulum, which is kind of that. I mean, you could even go more macro. For example, school. Like when you're at your university, your pendulum is swung all the way to the academics and learning, and you're not making very much money, but you're doing a lot of learning. And then after that, the pendulum should swing to the other direction, and now you're doing less academic learning, and you should be focused on your job and making the money and learning how to do your job the best. But then there's micro pendulums too, and that's from like the day to day or hour to hour. If I'm sitting at work and I've got this project to do, I can try and focus on that for the solid 8 hours or 10 hours that I'm going to be at work. That's going to be exhausting. And by the end of the day, I'm probably not even going to be doing anything worthwhile at that point. But if I split that up into smaller chunks and let the pendulum swing hard for, an hour or something, and then took a 10-minute walk around the building and maybe talked to some people and went outside and got some fresh air and walked. I think walking, for me, running is when I do my best thinking, but humans were designed to walk. And so when you walk, you're engaging your nervous system and you're getting blood flow going, and you're bringing blood back into the brain and everything. Let the pendulum swing, get some exercise, get some breaths, stop thinking about it for a minute. The back of your mind is still going to be thinking about it. And when you come back, you're going to be a lot stronger than had you just continued plowing through. So that's kind of how I think about awareness without exhaustion, which was your question. It has to be metered. We're humans. We need to have that recovery time, macro recovery and even micro recovery.
I love that. And so I just read a little while ago, it's interesting you talk about walking. They say there is a specific time in your lived experience that you have to disconnect from trying to achieve or have purpose towards something. And walking without, some people that go, I'm going speed walking. You're still trying to achieve a certain heart. So walking, just kind of like striding along, just kind of like do, right? And just being in this. So I love the way you unpack that, because the question was awareness without exhaustion. And what you brought up for me is, how do we get into a sustainable flow state? It's one thing to get into the state, but how do we get into sustainable without it being hyper vigilant? Because hyper vigilant isn't sustainable. It's for the moment, but hyper vigilant is kind of governed by a state of fear. Like, will I be able to stay there? Will it stay there? And then, of course, that negates your sleeping ability and your deep sleep drops and your, your REM and all this stuff and your HRV, your metrics and sleep, your recovery time completely fall out the window. And so, momentary flow state is really cool, but consistent is what we want. And it's like, it's fascinating. So, listeners, when you hear this, I'm not suggesting we need to do this perfect, but I think we all want to say, how could I start piecing these things together, duct taping them together, start creating these connection pieces? And I know for myself, I'll never forget, well over a decade ago, when I checked back into life, because I checked out for 2.5 years, and basically, the listeners will know about this. I tried to exit life not by actually committing suicide, but by swallowing a handful of melatonin and gravel. And I did this for 2.5 years, and I successfully slept for 18.5 hours a day. Like, I was miserable. Like, I was not happy. And what's interesting, when I came out of that story, what do? Well, I had no interest in sleeping. Like, I said, listen, I know I was depressed, and that was learned helplessness. And there's certain things that I did to create that state. And so I was focusing on how to eliminate, not to utilize. That's what kept me in the story so long. But when I finally started utilizing without deciding good or bad, but just as all for me, that actually helped me exit that dystopic state. And what's interesting, so back to the sleep concept, I didn't want to sleep, and I thought sleep was a waste of time. And I found people that talked about sleep being a waste of time. And so I hacked my sleep until I sufficiently slept 2.5 hours a night for a year straight. That's all I slept. And my friend, my head was on fire. I was so excited. I was amazing. It was incredible. But the thing is, it was all leading to, I could feel this wasn't sustainable. And what's interesting is, the one night when I went to sleep, I remember asking myself, okay, James, you're trying to make up for lost time. How's that working?
Yeah.
It's not working. And I said, but this silly thing called sleep, if I do too much of it, I wonder if I'm going to be depressed again. These old stories. I'm like, wait a minute, that was then, this is now. It's not good or bad. It's then and now. And then all I asked myself, as I said, how could I be grateful for sleep? What could I think about? And this is what I came up with. I'm like, okay, James, you're not wanting to sleep because you're wanting to achieve, and go with that. I said, your brain says pattern, you want to achieve, go with it. I asked myself, what am I achieving at nighttime that I can't achieve during the day? And to this day, my friend Wes, I still ask myself that question every night. I love my recovery time. I don't label it as bad. I love it because I'm excited. What's going to happen? Because there's stuff that we achieve at nighttime that there's no bloody way that we could even get close to achieving. And it's not, sleeping is better than being awake, but it's like you say, sustainable flow state requires that we actively engage in that recovery. If we're not engaging in recovery, it's not going to be helpful long term. There's a book that came to mind, and it's so fast. And this is why I love to talk with people, pristine people like you, who are, for example, you're in the military, in the Air Force, because you guys get like the best training. You guys get like that. They often say the whole biohacking movement is actually to support creating better warriors. Some people talk about this. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is kind of interesting, right?
It is.
But right. And so there's a book, and I'm going to botch. I'll find out what it is, and I'll put it in the show notes. But I think the book is called How to Create Anything. And it is a very thin book. And it's a very short read. And it is so simple. And they asked the author after he'd written, aren't you afraid that people are going to create the things that you're creating? They're just going to duplicate. And he goes, I'm not worried about this at all, because what's easy to do is easy not to do. This is so easy to do, the formula of how to create anything well, and you just described it. And here's how. I'll say it like this. There's 3 stages. One is when you're deeply thinking about something and really focused on it, like laser down. My kids often say, ever since I came out of that story well over a decade ago, my kids say, when I focus on things, I just look at them. I don't make it uncomfortable, but they go, you're just with us. Like, and honestly, I can't do it any different, because that's just how I've become. I'm like, I need to be here with you. Presence is all that I've got, my friend. If I'm not picking up things, I'm not worried I'm not picking up the right things, but I just want to make sure that I am here with you. Like, I can't replace this moment. I once wasted some years of my life, 2.5 years. I'm not doing that shit again. I'm not worried about it, but I'm just doing it now. That's all. I'm present. And so there's 3 stages. The first one is you're really thinking deeply about something. The second stage, this is what is written in the book. It's so simple. The second stage, to your point, it's you disconnect from what you're thinking about and you do something totally different. You're not purposeful to create an outcome. You actually go like, you put the pen and paper down, or you stop training and you go for a walk, and you're like, you get lost in the trees. You hear a bird and you look at a squirrel and you contemplate the squirrel for a minute. I don't know, listen to music, but you're doing nothing really intentional. You're just like meandering. You're like, yeah, whatever. I'm here. I'm just existing. And so it brings you into this state of harmony with nature. And I think it reminds you, this is my ad lib here. I think it reminds you to harmonize with nature. Because if we think as a human that nature needs to harmonize around us, we're in trouble. It's the other way around. We need to harmonize with nature. That's the disconnected state. Then what happens, without it being strategically planned, while you're in a state of disconnect, you're meandering through, all of a sudden, and this isn't planned. You didn't go for a walk or didn't listen to music so you could put it all together. But what happens is all of a sudden something happens within your environment, and that exact thing helps you to connect the deep thought you had with presently what's going on. Boom, breakthrough. Now you have the idea that affects current society in the most beneficial way. You know, and so it's interesting is I used to blame me and Harrison was diagnosed with high functioning autism. I've never been diagnosed, but I'll say this. I understand Harrison quite well because I've taught myself how to think, how to live, how to be aware. I used to be like all over the place, like well before, well, even after I was married. I've been married to Meg 22 years, but for the first 7 years of our marriage, she really helped me to like understand what it meant to love, to be at peace, to be non-chaotic and not be against, and, you know, all these really neat things. And one day she says to me, and she hadn't given me this book yet, she had found it, but she thought I might not think it's credible because it's so short. It wasn't like challenging there's nothing magical. It was just like, follow this. And she said, actually, I'm going to give you a book, but you and Harrison already do this. And she goes, sometimes I envy you and Harrison. I said, oh. And she goes, what you and Harrison will do is you'll get really deep on something. Like you guys go like laser deep. Like, then all of a sudden out of the blue, she goes, we're Rowan and I, we're just going to keep working, right? Because we need to get deeper. Or we need to like, well, she goes, what you and Harrison do is you just stand up all of a sudden, push it aside. You're like, okay, I'm going on the water slides. Okay, I'm going for a walk or something. And she goes, I envy that in you. But she goes, here's the thing. People who are, and again, I wouldn't say I'm on the autism spectrum, but there's something going on. Like there's speed of thought. Something's happening here, right? And I think we all have we're all on the spectrum to some degree. But she says, I envy that in you because you are so present and so laser focused, so deep thinking when you're there that literally it's like you go, I can't do more of it. I'm going to like snap, like to the point of Harrison earlier. So I'm just going to put it down. I've put my thoughts. And so then I go for a walk or do something. And then she goes, you come back and you're just like lit up like a candlestick, or like, she goes, not even when you come back sometimes it's like you talk to me about something you worked on 2 weeks ago, and all of a sudden, boom, it just all connects. And she goes, there's something about that I wish I had. And what's interesting, she goes, now when I read the book, she goes, I know how to create it. I know how to create it. And that the military, if you think about it, like just amazing. Like we have a whole structure that educates people how to get into flow state. Like I think, and I don't want to get lost in the weeds on this one, but I think we have to be so careful. Some people are so untowards towards militant people. They're like, yeah, but they're just killing people. Well, just hang on a half a second. You know what I mean? Like before we take that rabbit hole, think about and not just the tools. I mean, look at the quality of human being that you are. Like the listeners can pick this up. Like you're present, you're here. I ask questions. I don't think I've ever had any. I have a good people on the talk. I don't think I've ever had anybody in the talk who like. And I actually forgot what I asked, but you answered all four things. I'm not trying to say you're better than people. What I'm saying is there's something that you chose to do. What do you think has you stay desiring to participate with something more than you? Because that's surrender. That's not throwing the white flag. That's like going, oh, no. What is it about you?
Well, I mean, you know, it's purpose. And a lot of times in the military, the purpose is assigned to you. You know, a lot of people join any military and it's out of a sense of patriotism and a call to duty. And then the military assigns the purpose that they want you to have in whatever job it is. But you said it earlier, being a part of such a large organization that's affecting so much change for your country and the world as a whole, there's something that's it's bigger than you. Like you are a part of it, and you are you are a crucial part to making that happen, but the effect is so much bigger than you. And I
Mm.
think it's part of that. I do have a
Ooh.
strong sense of duty. Um,
Mm.
but I th- honestly, a lot of it is the military has treated me very well. I've had a lot of really good commanders who, honestly, maybe not in explicit terms, but they care a lot about a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about, and about
Oh.
attention and about optimizing
Mhm.
performance and about making sure that you have enough rest and recovery to be able to come back and perform your best. So I think there's that aspect, but there's also the aspect of my personal purpose, which you kind of read towards the beginning, is really it's teaching people how to lead in the attention age. I
Mhm.
think we're moving into a new age where we're in the, and we may even be already past the information age. I think we're moving into a new age. The attention age is what I
Yeah.
call it. Some people call it the creativity age, or the creative age, or the imagination age. But leading, as paradigms change, the leadership that's required and the problems that come up because of it are changing. So we can't use problems from solutions
Mm.
to problems
Mm.
from decades ago to address the problems that we're seeing right now.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
honestly, like over the last couple of years, I think that has become abundantly clear when
Mhm.
we try to apply old solutions to the new problems and it doesn't work, and we wonder why it isn't working. It's
Mhm.
because everything has been changing, and especially with technology and computers changing so rapidly, the problems that come up because of it
Mhm.
are happening so fast that we don't even understand that. For example, how many advertisements do you think the average person sees in a day? Now, and that's like, you know, I've got the radio on, I hear a radio advertisement, I'm watching Netflix, or I guess not necessarily Netflix, but Hulu or YouTube, you see an ad there, driving down the road, you see a billboard or the sign on the side of a truck. Um, all over Facebook are advertisements. How many advertisements do you think the average person, you, for
Gosh,
example, would
gosh,
see?
yeah. I know I've read this a long time ago. I know it's some crazy amount, but I'm just gonna throw it out. 300, 200.
Yeah, you're about one order of magnitude off. It's on the order of like 4 to 5 thousand ads every single
Holy
day, and
moly.
there's room for like, what do you define as an ad? But the point is, we are barraged like
Mm.
no other time in history
Mm.
with people and organizations trying to grab our attention and pull it in their
Mm.
direction. And that is a major problem
Mm.
for what we've been talking about, for being able to see patterns and
Mhm.
digging down deep, like you and your son Harrison can do, to address a problem and to figure out the solution to a problem, and then break out of it and have that, like, the micro recovery time where you go to the slides or you go take a walk, or whatever it is, and still be able to have your mind recover and process in the background. Because the second I go outside and take a walk, what is it? What would, like,
Mm.
when you walk
Mhm.
outside and you see
Mhm.
somebody on a walk or a smoke break, they're always like this. I don't know how our necks are just like, trained to just be like at a 90-degree angle from our spine, because we're all looking down at our phones, and
Mhm.
we're putting it on ourselves. Like the amount of just uh and much of it is worthless
Mhm.
stimulus
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
going into our
Mhm.
minds. I think that's one of the biggest problems. And even going back to your awareness without exhaustion, we're exhausting ourselves because we're
Mhm.
just always having to make those micro judgments. Oh, I should get a new washing machine. Do I need a new washing machine? Probably need a new washing machine. No, I don't know if I need a new washing. And then you're not even complete with that thought, and
Mhm.
you've been barraged
Mhm.
with something else.
Mhm.
Oh, that t-shirt looks awesome. I need to go buy that. Oh, I don't have enough money for that. How can I get? I could afford that t-shirt. Like, it's so much, and I think that is it's well, I know that is dragging down the collective societal attention that we are paying
Mhm.
to being
Mhm.
creative, to how to create anything. We are being undermined by that whole entire advertisement and attention economy, surveillance capitalism, all of those new things that are coming out as a result of how rapidly technology has been
Mhm.
accelerating,
Mhm.
and we can't keep up. These guys, the guys making the apps and the devices, um, I think a lot of them know some of the major consequences that are a
Mhm.
result of the algorithms and how getting inside our psychological feedback loop to extract as much attention out of us as possible. But I think that's going to catch up to us. And I think that'll become very clear over the next couple decades when we've gone, the youngest generation, like my daughters will never know life without these things. I at least had the advantage of having a small period of time. I was born in 90. So there was a time before cell phones and definitely before smartphones. But my daughters will never know a time without that. And by the time they reach adulthood and are starting to put back into society instead of being a draw on society and being in the educational phase, I think there's going to be a lot of things that are, and we can't even really predict. Like we can have thought experiments about it, and how will that manifest? But we're starting to see it now, with some of the new generations reaching that age. But that is kind of my call to purpose, is to help people, help you, help me, help our families and the communities lead in the attention age, which is a whole new set of problems. And it will require us paying attention to the right places in order to do that.
Well, and who doesn't at the base at some point want larger impact? And I think to your point earlier, the effect is so much bigger. Like I asked you, so what has you sign up for a program, part of a structure? What has you there? What has you? Because some people go, well, I still need the reminder to stay humble. And then other people are like, yeah, that's good. Some people come here for helpful parenting, which is good, right? The other thing is, no, but I'm here and I'm kind of here for long term because I buy into that the effect is much bigger if we do this together. And so impact really, you're saying, listen, let it be known I can do some good here, but I can do more, like 1 + 1 compounding interest. Like think about this, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1, when you activate, brings about a really, really unique response. It's fascinating when I hear you talk, you talk about patterns, and who in life doesn't want to see clearly? I think until you can quieten down, I have this thing where I say increase the signal to noise ratio. The signal to noise ratio. It's like, imagine you were in the cockpit, my friend, and this is a rhetorical question. I know your answer is going to be, but can you imagine if you had 4,000 ads pinging you on the glass? There's no way you could execute. There's not even maybe. There's no way. You wouldn't be thinking, you wouldn't be going from like deeply conscious thought, which is stage 1 of that 3-step process I said earlier about how to create anything. You wouldn't be going deeply conscious and then deeply trusting your subconscious. If you don't, and that's stage 2, like you're going for a walk, there's something going on in there, something happening. You have brought it in. If you're present with it, you can trust that something is going on in there. But if you're not present when it's happening, you probably can't trust that there's something going on back there because you weren't even thinking about it. You weren't even doing anything. You know what I mean? So exactly to that point, if you're bombarded with like Netflix and this and that, and what just comes alive for me is this, and this is thought just erupted as you're talking. I don't fuel those advertisements, but to some degree, there's more money that trickles into their coffers, even though they know that I'm not even aware of anything beyond what I said, which is 200 to 300. It's like to the order of magnitude. You said 3,000-4,000, which means that somehow I'm still parting with my money or whatever it is, my time, my attention, my capital, and it's finding its way into their place, which is to say they know that subconsciously is where everything happens. They go, if we can just get you there, if we can just go, like we create so much noise that your signal, my friend, nothing left. You're just like being sucked into a vortex. You're like, yeah, I'm at the whim of, I just saw this, so I pulled the trigger and I think I just killed some innocent civilians. You'll go, I didn't know. And it's so fascinating. That I love that how you started the podcast where you said, actually, to be in the cockpit, I'm just closing my eyes because I'm needing to almost desensitize from everything right now. And I'm just feeling quietness. Just a whisper quiet. You're just zipping through the air. All you're doing is you're just going, I hear these things in my mind. I'm thinking about the washer maybe, and I'm thinking about my wife's conversation, and I'm letting it all serve me. It's all because of this, not in spite of, but I go like, I hear all this, but I get to decide what I want to choose now. I get to decide. It isn't somebody saying, would you like to come here? Would you like to do this? Would you like to do? It's like, whoa, could you just stop all the shoulds? It's like, you stop shitting on yourself basically. and you just drop down. And it's what's fascinating is I think human beings, when we're so not afraid of the evidence that will erupt from our action, it's just powerful. It's like, listen, there's something in there, and I'm a force for good. And I'm going to see to it that it's going to happen. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be laser focused. I'm going to be in. I'm going to be in. So my friend,
That's good.
go ahead.
You said how to increase the signal from the noise. A lot of what I talk about is the signal, and there's a lot of math. The radar in my aircraft does signal or noise reduction so that it can see the signal to find the target. But you phrased it, increase the signal from the noise, and a lot of times what I say is decrease the noise so that the signal can become apparent. So that's really interesting. I'll have to give that some thought of like, how do we, and maybe you have a thought, how do we actually increase the signal? And I would think it's got something to do with like what it is that we're like dialing your attention and your focus on something specific will just by doing that increase its signal. And then the decreasing the noise piece is being good about silencing notifications, or putting yourself in a place that's less distracting and things like that, where you're literally reducing the noise. I think that's really interesting. One last note before this passes, you said, could I do my job if there were all these advertisements over the glass and the canopy? It's funny that you say that, because one of the things that we're actually working on and having to evaluate a lot more is we've gotten to the point where we can have the aircraft give so much information to the pilot that we're getting to the point where we have to actually start reducing the amount of information we're putting on the displays, because it is becoming too much. Just the amount of different information that we're having to work through is slowing down our process. And we're trying to see how we can have the jet automate a lot more of that, so that things are happening in the background and maybe just letting us know that it's happening, as opposed to being like, here's the things, what do you want to do with it? It'll just go ahead and it'll take the default choice, and you can always override it or whatever. But we're trying to and I am probably one of the champions of this, is like, how can we like reduce the, just because there's so many different things that you could display, so many pieces of information, but all of that is potentially distraction from the bandit who's right there, and the bandit who's right there.
Are they solving and optimizing for decreasing human error? Is that what they're doing? By what I mean by reducing this, you see, there's a book called The Fourth Turning, and the fourth turning just basically helps us to see what the human tendency is in life and how people choose to respond over thousands of years. And so there's cycles. And so if we lean on patterns to predict, we get in trouble. But if we lean on tendencies, we can't predict with absoluteness, which means there's a play we have to be aware of. We can't just lean on patterns. So I hear what you're saying, because there are some things perhaps automate. The only thing is, where do you then allow some other nuanced thought that comes as maybe, and I just think there's source or God or something that allows us to co-create while we're just being in silence with it. Awesome. Boom. There it is. So there's that magic. It's not just computing, robotics. It's always been like this, because typically robotics and computing programming is based on the past. And so it's like, how do we not by default set ourselves up for a problem where we think we have the current solution, but actually it's antiquated? Because at the day, anyway, you hear where I'm going with this?
I do. And that's an interesting thought, because as I'm thinking about this, I think the way that we've thought about any problem that we're solving with our fighter, there's always an optimum tactic to apply. And by giving too much information to the pilot, we are reducing the chances that they will, in the amount of in the time, at the speed of relevance, I guess is the hot
term. You hit the edge. So you hit the edge.
Yeah, being able to make the right decision in the right amount of time, we're distracting ourselves from that, because we're giving ourselves.
Come on, you got more. Come on, you got more. You got more. Come on.
Well, but
hey, I don't mean to. No, but I get it. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we are human, and there's physical factors in the cockpit. There's
just a
mental
second.
factors.
Just a second. The American fighter pilots protect our airspace in Canada, so don't tell me you don't have more in there. I get it though.
We need you to
No,
have more.
no, I know, I totally get it. No, so okay, no, I'm listening because you're the one live in the air, and you're saying there is a point, no matter how we work, which I completely, and I think the reason that I said increase the signal to noise ratio, because noise we can't control so much. We can with noise canceling headphones, or like you do canopy, different glass, or like whatever different noise effects. I'm sure that they pipe in, or I don't know what they do, but it's like, this is just my opinion. But I think if we're gonna think that we're gonna control the noise, we can't. The noise is everywhere. The cell phone everywhere. The noise is everywhere. Now you have the luxury in the plane where you can to some degree. However, like you say, there's more things happening. So there's more things you're stress testing in real time, and that brings more screens popping up, more things, more analytics probably. And so my way of looking at it, which I see where you're coming from, makes sense to decrease the noise. But I wonder if not we run into a situation where we're like, the only thing we really have is to find a way to increase the human signal. Because when the signal is here, this is always greater than the noise. If now I am the voice, if this is the voice, it doesn't matter what bloody noise you have around us. Basically, pardon the language, just fucking move over. I'm here. I'm here. Like, and I'm here and I'm present. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
And that's I would disagree with you partially there, because
Please.
I think there is a level of, we will never be able to completely reduce the noise, because there's always noise, and it's noise of a lot of the noise of our day to day and what all we need to do during the day just to be alive. I mean, heck, like spending time eating breakfast at some level is noise that's distracting me from the potential signal that I want to be able to pay attention to. So there's a baseline level of noise, but I think today the information age has given us such a level of artificial noise on top of that kind of baseline noise that is drowning us out. I mean, like the only time that my cell phone actually vibrates or makes a noise, and usually it's only vibrate, is for a phone call. Every single other type of message or notification, text message, everything else is silent. It does not notify me. So I have eliminated that level of noise of, I don't know.
And I love that. So to your point, I would agree 100%. So thanks for stress testing and bringing that to the surface, because listeners, I'm not saying that don't monitor your noise. It's like, so unfortunately, the evidence shows different, because we started the talk and all of a sudden, bing, bing, bing. And I just did a new Apple update. And, honestly, I have my computer turned to do not disturb all the time. Just like you, my phone doesn't alert me to nothing other than if I go to my app and I see my text there, but it doesn't give me any note. So I love that, because you have, that's a very, thank you for that point. You have to be intentional, because if you're not, and you just think that you can handle looking at all this stuff, to some degree, there is a moment, like nature fills the void. Nature will fill the void. You get to decide though how you fill the void. The only thing is, nature will catch you at a weak spot where you're a little tired, you're dropping down a little in your energy, and also like, I'm just gonna go, and I mean, I don't have Facebook, but I'm like, I'm gonna go scroll on Facebook, and you know what I mean? It's like, what am I doing?
Well, not only that, we've trained ourselves to keep the void full to the brim.
Right?
There is no void, because
there's no space.
We don't know how to not have that void filled. So that's a great point. But I think you're right though. I think we do need to, there's some level of figuring out how to increase the signal, and that signal being what it is that really matters. So focusing on what truly matters for you and for your family, for your community, for your organization, whatever it is, working at both increasing that signal,
love it,
while
both
decreasing the noise that we have.
I love it.
The power to decrease.
I love it. That's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good. Hey, there's a little quote that I want to read to you, and I think I mentioned this to you prior to our call. I think I may have, just to some degree, but for listeners, I'm going to just let them in on it as well. This is a precious one. I just love this one a lot. Victor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. For those that haven't read the book, it's a really nice one. It's a challenging one. I like to read it about once a year, just to tap me back into listen. If it's possible for a person like that, listen. I got any challenges come my way, I'll be okay. And so here's the quote. It talks about, this is what he says. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Listen, listeners, unless you create the space almost of silence. You need that. Give yourself the gift of that. Attention. What are you going to, and I love what you said, Wes, and exactly to your point, we become that which we focus on. You are just like all of us in the sense where you've had random thoughts that are crazy thoughts. We all have crazy thoughts. So it isn't like, oh, I need to like think about, is it good or bad? And, am I further along or not far enough along? Or do I, listen, it is about saying, am I going to focus on what's directly in front of me through the lens of good and bad, right or wrong constantly? You're going to get lost in the weeds. It's willpower exhaustion. You're never going to be able to focus. My friend, I honor you so deeply for the work that you do. You're in the military. Well, Air Force, I think is what you call it, right? Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Air Force. And a beautiful example of a sense of duty that goes, you have found a way, in my opinion, to connect with a larger audience, not just, even if you were just for military or just Air Force, amazing. But you have begun to see how actually what you require, what saves your ass basically, and ensures that you don't kill civilians, is that you need to be present and really present. And that's a very electrifying space. And I wanted to have you on the show because sometimes people go present. Yeah, that's boring though. Like, what is that? There's nothing going on. Like, just present with what? Like staring at something, like being like right here. Like, why don't I want to be here and there? Like multi-focus, maybe. You're like, well, wait a minute. Split focus never works. You need to be like mono-focused, focused on the thing. That's really what the human can do. And, honestly, psychology has even shown that to the point on, some people say, well, the opposite sex, the female can have the brains attached, so she can therefore focus on two. Psychology says you can actually only really focus on one thing at a time. If you really want to be present, if you really want to capture, like you did, the 4 questions that I asked, I forgot them by the time you answered. So I honor you deeply for it. I would love to at some point in time have you on again because I've just begun. I got so many questions, I just can't ask them. We got to end it. So
Yeah, I would be honored. James, it's been a pleasure, and you as well. The work that you're doing, I've been listening to some of your recent podcasts, and they all make me think, which I think is one of the biggest things. Just what is something to think about that's going to potentially affect where I'm going in a positive way. So I appreciate you having me on the
but
show, James.
Before I let you go, I want people to find you. So this is what it's all about. I want people to know where they can find you because you're about some great work, my friend. So if you don't mind, just take this, own this space, own it. Where can people find you and what's going to happen once they find you?
WesWoodhouse.com is the best way. And you can sign up for a phone call there, get to know me and see how I can help you to increase the signal and decrease the noise as we move into being leaders in the attention age. That'd be the best way. WesWoodhouse.com. I appreciate it, James.
That's awesome. And I'll put it in the show notes and listeners, I'll put some of the books I mentioned in the show notes as well. So my friend, you are an absolute treat and it's an honor to host you. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
With inflation rates rising, interest rates shooting up, gas prices skyrocketing, and the continued global unrest, it's easy to find what's wrong in the world. Tony Robbins says, what's wrong in the world is always available, but so is what's right. Instead of trying to hope and wish the world into a better place, it's time to make the most important decision any of us can ever make, and that is to invest in yourself. Now, you already know that I've always stood with you as you've navigated the uncertainties of life's reality. However, it's now high time that I step up and take decisive action to walk alongside your current life journey by making myself available to you in a radically new way during these challenging times. For a limited time, I'm inviting you to a 45-minute strategic business life consultation at no charge and no strings attached. This consultation is where you'll regain the reins of your life. It's where you'll gain clarity on exactly why you're stuck, moving you directly towards your optimal outcomes. I'm humbled to say, however, my clients' generous reflection of their time spent with me reveals the truth. The skills they've been able to master in a short period of time by engaging in our one-on-one strategic sessions have changed their lives in so many ways. This is the only invitation that I can fathom that will put my skin in the game of your life in such a way that will allow us to address your specific needs with precision and excellence. 45 minutes, just you and I, together on a call to get you headed in the direction you crave most. Here's what my clients report after our one-on-one sessions. A decrease in indecision, an increase in clarity, confidence, and courage, an increase in fully being able to capitalize on what's directly in front of them, an increase in impact at work, on their families, and on their communities, a decrease in pain and suffering, and a decrease in anxiety. So, if you want to move beyond old stories, get clear on where you're headed so that you can shake your world, then here's a rich opportunity for you today. Simply go to www.jameshepner.com and stay on the page for about 45 seconds or so, and you'll see a little pop-up appear that will allow you to book in your business life consultation with me. This offer will expire and fill up. Maximizing this opportunity will set you up to reclaim and regain any of your inner power that has slowly been drawn down over these challenging times. And remember, if you want to stop the self-sabotage, raise your standards, and participate with unshakable confidence, you'll want to take the Maximize Your Life quiz found at www.jameshepner.com/quiz right now. My sincere hope is that you've gleaned a few nuggets for yourself and a few pieces of interest that help you move forward in your unique journey. So again, I thank you for joining me here. This is James Hepner clocking out. Until next time, peace out, rock up.